While on a mountain bike ride down such and such trail, located approximately 17 miles northwest of Chelan, Washington, I came around a left-hand bend in the trail, which was proceeding up a ridgeline slope of moderate grade. The trail was well packed and damp, as a rainstorm had preceded my biking trip by 2 days. This weather pattern was unusual for central Washington in the late summer month of August. I was biking alone, and the section of trail preceding my unidentified animal sighting was downhill and allowed me to ride quickly, making little noise. As I proceeded around the left-hand bend in the trail, my vision was drawn to a motion on the ridgeline that continued to my upward left. What I saw was a tall, approximately 8 feet, dark brown, long-haired animal running rapidly in a bipedal manner from the exposed ridgeline in a northwesterly direction. He remained in my line of vision as he ran through a moderately dense, high alpine forest. It was astounding to me how quickly and quietly the animal was able to move for his sheer body size. I immediately stopped my bike with the initial sight of this animal. After stopping my bike, the animal remained within my sight for approximately 10 to 15 seconds as he was running rapidly away from my intrusion. There was no mistaking this animal's height, as I'm 6'4", and my estimate of 8 feet may be a moderate estimate of actual height. There was also no mistaking the bipedal pattern of running exhibited by this unknown animal. After seeing the animal run through the forest, I dropped my bike where I stood and walked quietly down to the point where I saw him cross the trail. The tracks of this animal showed poorly as the ground on either side of the trail was densely vegetated with low-lying grasses and shrubs. It was remarkable to see such a large animal move so quickly and efficiently through the density of the forest. I looked for broken twigs, branches, or hair, and found none. I failed to find tracks within the trail, too. On today's episode of The Wandering Crow, we'll be discussing Bigfoot and the different types of Bigfoot that can be found regionally around the United States. It should be a pretty fun episode, so stay tuned after the music.
There is a medicine story that tells of Crow's fascination with her own shadow. She kept looking at it, pecking at it until her shadow woke up and became alive. Then Crow Shadow ate her. Crow is dead Crow now. Join us as we attempt to look through the wandering crow's eye to find the gateway to the supernatural, to seek to know the unknowable mysteries of creation. Welcome to the Wandering Crow Podcast. Hi, murderers. This is Mandy.
This is JT.
This is Abby.
And this is Cameron.
Yay, we're back. This episode is all about Bigfoot and its many different kinds. But before we get into the episode, we wanted to try and defeat the algorithm a little bit. We need your help, listeners, murderers and wanderers. We need you to subscribe. We need you to leave us a rating and review on the podcast. We need you to, if you can, download all of the episodes, share us with your friends, follow us on Instagram if you'd like to, follow us on Facebook if you'd like to, join our Discord, send us an email with your story, and check out our website. TheWanderingCrow.com is the website, which means the email is wanderingcrowpodcast@gmail.com. There we go. And we'll have all of the links to all of our things that you can follow and check us out on in the show notes. So please feel free. And again, like, subscribe, follow, leave a review. That would be super helpful for us. I think that's all we need to say. Yeah? Okay. All right. So getting into the episode, JT in particular was pretty excited. And in his show note for his name, he says, Bigfoot is my granddad. Is that true, JT? That's amazing.
No, that's
I didn't know that about you. Own it, man.
I'm not that hairy. It might be like, put 30 grates on that or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not really from the region that would be linked back to Bigfoot.
what region is
Sweden?
that? Yeah.
The region would be, well, I guess if you really think about it, and
Asia, right?
Yeah.
if you think about where human civilization began religiously, it would date back to Adam and Eve, because there is a theory that Bigfoot is actually Cain.
Oh.
Because he killed Abel, he was
Oh, wow.
cursed to roam the earth for the rest of his for eternity as a giant
Hairy
Sasquatch, hairy
creature monster thing.
beast monster.
Interesting. Okay.
If we want to talk about the non-religious origins of Bigfoot, then we could talk about Gigantopithecus.
Ooh, tell me about that.
Gigantopithecus is actually a studied and known 10-foot tall, I guess you could call it humanoid, but it's like an orangutan ape family fossil record that was discovered in, I want to say, Southeast Asia in the 1930s. And it was believed to have exist and survive for 500,000 years now. I didn't go deep into how that was dated, but they don't have a lot to go off of, and so they can't determine if it truly was bipedal. There are some people who want to speculate that it may have been, and others who speculate that it was probably more like it traveled around on its knuckles like an orangutan. Some people believe that it may be part of the evolutionary chain of hominids, whereas I think anthropologists are leaning more toward this is closer to the ape family and more removed from hominids. But regardless, a lot of people think that due to the height and size of Bigfoot, estimated oftentimes to be about 8 feet tall and 1,000 pounds, the Gigantopithecus was estimated to be 10 feet tall and like 1,500 pounds. So it's not that far fetched to believe it could be a descendant that migrated to America when the Bering Land Bridge existed or was available between Russia, really, Northern Asia, and Alaska at the peak of the last ice age. It was so about 47,000 to 36,000 years ago. There was a 10,000 year window when there was the Bering Land Bridge. And so that was when humans are estimated to have migrated here. And if we want to go down that road, probably these Bigfoot species too.
So it's so interesting. There is a legend among the Paiutes. So the area that my homework was the southwest of the United States. And the Paiute, and I want to say is this Colorado? Is this Utah? It's one of the states just north of Arizona.
Probably Colorado, I think.
Might have been, maybe. They have a legend of the 10-foot tall red-headed giants that were cannibalistic in eating their people, and they had to go to war with them and trap them in a cave and burn them all up. And apparently, supposedly, there have been not fossil, but like bone discovery. There have been some discoveries which in some ways corroborate that myth. And it's interesting because I didn't know about this. What is it called? The giant.
So there's two different
Gigantopithecus?
species. Gigantopithecus and something gigantus. Two different. There was some minor fossil records found, like jaw bones, like some pieces of them. They don't have enough to be able to completely
build a skeleton.
Reconstruct one, but based on those, that's the whole study of anthropology, is the study of bones, and they can estimate if your jaw is this big, then what we know about these other animals and proportions, we can guess this much about you, and they can look at muscular attachments and determine how muscular something was, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting.
That's very interesting because I'm I'm hunting down a story right now of giants in the Superstition Mountains.
I
The
think we
the
should do a separate episode about giants,
yes.
honestly, because there
Well,
is the Afghanistan giant thing that supposedly happened in Kandahar recently between United States, I think, Marines, and then there is this whole the Paiute legend, and then I didn't know about the superstition giants.
yeah, this is
That's interesting.
the most recent one died only 500 years ago, and the Pima Indians were the ones that killed it.
Hmm. Yeah, that Paiute legend is not that long ago. Like hundreds of years, not thousands, by some like from what I've heard. But
But I
moving
was,
along. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was going
Sorry.
to save that for the Indigenous Peoples Day episode.
Excellent. So, moving along, there is another theory which kind of is in the same vein. There is this idea that I guess some anthropologists have been kind of floating out there that this Bigfoot thing, that the stories are actually living oral legends, like living oral memory. So it's this memory that is sustained, but because it's an oral memory, we don't really know the time frame that these stories were told. So we just know that they are stories that have been repeated and they were believed because at one time indigenous peoples actually interacted with these animals. So like there is, as an example, the story of indigenous peoples, the giant beaver eater, and they talked about this creature that had lived and they had seen and turned over an entire nest of beavers and like plucked the beavers out like nothing and ate them like they were candy. Well, beavers are actually fairly large creatures and their dams are gigantic. And they said it was like this 10-foot tall creature that sort of looked like a bear but wasn't. So anthropologists showed them a bunch of pictures of like land mammals, and the ones that they picked out that most closely resembled the creature they had seen was a giant land sloth, which has been extinct for several thousand years. So the theory is that ancient peoples really truly did encounter this creature, and that there have been found some corroborating like skeletal evidence of the sloth in this area thousands of years prior. But because the oral tradition is so strong, and it was, grandmother, grandfather, whatever, generations back, that they're remembering in kind of like an oral way something that happened many thousands of years ago. So it's not like it's incorrect or it's something that was imagined. It truly did happen, but the way that the stories are conveyed doesn't really have time. So using that example, some anthropologists think that it's possible that older humans, like people from these tribes from many, many generations before, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 years before, genuinely did encounter other humans. That there may have been, what do they call them? Remnant populations. That's what they called them. Remnant populations of Neanderthals. Small pockets of populations in really remote areas, not just in the United States, but also in Russia. There is actually a fairly recent story of a supposed population of Neanderthals that people were actually asking the Tsar, please protect these peoples. They're being hunted like they're animals. Please protect them. They're your citizens too. They're citizens of Russia too. And there has been some evidence that there actually were Neanderthals in that area. Nothing recent, but that there were something. So there's this idea that perhaps Bigfoot is a memory that truly did happen that has been carried forward in time. And there isn't any good perspective on how long ago these interactions happened. So for the indigenous peoples, it was like yesterday. And colonizers, the new people who have come in, have taken the stories and run away with it and are labeling things that are not Bigfoot at all, but are like bears and like other creatures in the woods as Bigfoot because they don't genuinely understand. Just like in previous episodes, I want to bring forward possible theories, whether or not I believe in those theories. I think it's a valid story.
JT, you
many
are
of
a
these,
believer,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm a believer in all
Cameron?
kinds of things. Yeah.
Oh, your audio sounds really good today, JT.
Does it? Well,
Yeah.
maybe it's the way I hung
His
my
blanket fort is working.
Sorry.
It's the blanket. Yes.
Blanket
good.
forts.
All right.
My only
so
problem with that is Neanderthal is shorter than humans.
they're smaller. I was going to say the same thing. I was about to
Oh.
ask you to clarify if you were trying to say that maybe Neanderthals were being mistaken, but they were known for being squatter, like shorter and more muscular.
Okay.
I was trying to share it, but you can't share pictures in the chat. They're like a foot shorter than the average human, like
Okay.
modern human.
I thought it was an interesting idea, and perhaps it's not remnant
is.
populations of Neanderthal. Perhaps it's remnant populations of the Gigantopithecus or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it is an interesting, and I felt like because you had brought up your idea or your theory that you had researched, mine sort of is similar. I think
It's
I think
parallel,
it's
for
worth
sure.
considering. It's always a good idea to consider the more mundane explanations before diving deep into the crazy explanations, which I love. And I don't necessarily not believe them. It's just fun. But you got to look at all of the ideas that are out there.
Well, in my research, I've found that many of these beasts, or Bigfoots, or whatever you want to call them, all stem from Native American lore. All of them. I mean, Sasquatch is the Native American term for Bigfoot in the Northeast. But every single one that I've looked up and looked at, they all have something to do with a Native American tribe or oral history from the Native American tribes, because they don't have any other way of really passing on what they believe. So,
And that could
and
just be
also
exposure.
they were the first people here
true.
for
Well, I think it's
tens
more
of
so to do
thousands
with
of
like
years.
exposure, because they were out in the wilds more.
Hmm.
They were in the thick of it, literally.
Mhm.
They were able to see these things more often because they were out hunting in
They were living
the
like them
forests. Yeah.
in the natural, in the wild of the land.
And then for us, even the settlers, we just started farming and we had our agriculture and we had the, what do they call it? Livestock. We had livestock.
We tried to
didn't
keep
really
our
need to go out.
civilization separate from the wild. Yeah.
We started settling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that Sasquatch, it comes from the native language of the Salish tribe along the Pacific Northwest. Actually, there's two different tribes. There's the coastal Salish, and then there's like inland Salish, which are a little more in kind of toward the Rocky Mountains, JT. The Idaho, Montana, they're more the inland. Anyway, so Salish, in the Salishan language, it was Sesket. Sesket means wild man, and that's where Sasquatch came from somehow eventually, as language evolves, as it always does. From Sesket, which means wild man in the Salish language, came Sasquatch. And so for a lot of America, actually, like a lot of regions in America, will call it Bigfoot or Sasquatch interchangeably. And then it turns out there are some places that have a little more niche names for what these big things that resemble a Bigfoot are. And I don't, again, we segmented off how we were researching that. And so I'm a little curious to know how or why these other names kind of branch off. Is it because people believe that they're different, or is it because maybe once upon a time, before information was more available, people were seeing these things and they were being given their own names?
That's what I think. So that's exactly what I think. I'm so glad you brought that up. So I have a few of them, like of the mine, were seen more than 100 years ago. And the name Sasquatch, Bigfoot, those two terms became very popularized in the 1950s. So when we have, I suspect, and I am curious to know, that when we have things like the grassman, the Ohio grassman, the skunk ape, what is the one that I have? The Borrego Sandman. The Borrego Sandman was the stories that start from that are popularized begin in the 30s. So that was before Sasquatch and Bigfoot became really popularized and was the term that we were using. And I wonder if that's true of all of these little niche names, that they were like you were saying, they were seen and given names before the term Sasquatch became kind of like the big vernacular. Someone was going to say something and I cut you off. Sorry.
So the Fuke monster, 1971. The Grassman, popularized 1978.
Interesting.
Midnight Whistler, one doesn't
And that
have a good
one's
timeline.
easy to understand because everybody says that these things make all these whistling sounds, these shrieking noises.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that this one doesn't have a timeline though.
The whistling one?
Yeah.
What about the wood
Midnight
booger,
Whistler.
JT? Tell me about the wood booger. Why that name?
Well, wood booger is more of a kind of, I think, more modern version. There's actually a statue of it, and it looks more like a Sasquatch than, say, like the Dogman that's in that same area. But this is in southwestern Virginia. I think it was just like the 70s and 80s when all of the kind of this.
Same thing with the skunk ape. 1950s to 1970s is when the increased sightings happened. It was first reported 1818 in a newspaper, a man-sized monkey stealing food and stalking fishermen. But then not really again since.
It makes you wonder when, like, the news media conglomeration and Associated Press started, and they all started webbing together and sharing stories with each other.
Or just people wanting to say, I saw it too.
Bigfoot was popularized in 1958 when news media picked up a story about Ray Wallace, a road contractor working in Northern California. He had made plaster casts of giant footprints that he found near his work site. Hundreds of similar footprints and a few handprints have now been reported. Some were clearly made by bears, some are fraudulent, and many others remain unexplained. It was a few years later in the 60s, and I don't have the exact year, that the Peter Gimlin film, the Bigfoot, that famous one that we get
67, yeah.
That we talked about.
Giblin?
Patterson Gimlin. And the two ranch dudes had that video that was released to the world, and that's when Bigfoot just really exploded. So 58 is when we first get those first trickles, and then in 67, and then suddenly in the 70s and 80s, everybody's seeing Bigfoot. That's when a lot of stories seem to have been told, was in the 70s and the 80s. But I do have some that were from the 1800s, and there are stories that are very old from that time period. So here I've got the legend of the Borrego Sandman. The Borrego Sandman is a formidable figure, said to stand an imposing 8 feet tall and weigh up to 400 pounds. Witnesses describe the creature as being covered in shaggy white fur, a striking contrast to the sun-scorched desert landscape it calls home. Perhaps most unnerving are the Sandman's eyes, which are said to glow an eerie red, piercing through the darkness of the desert night. In many ways, the Borrego Sandman bears a striking resemblance to the more well-known Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Both are described as large, ape-like creatures that walk upright on 2 legs. However, the Sandman's white fur and desert habitat set it apart, leading some to speculate that it may be a distinct subspecies of Bigfoot, one that is adapted to the harsh, arid conditions of the Anza Borrego Desert. And this is California. So the Anza Borrego Desert is a massive state park encompassing over 585,000 acres, including 1/5 of all of San Diego County. It makes it the largest state park in California. Parts of the state park are called the Borrego Badlands and the Borrego Sink. Within these areas quite possibly resides a horrid beast, 8 feet tall, weighing 400 pounds, with its white furry hair. So this is another one of those throwaway statements that I'm just not sure, because it doesn't actually reference which tribe. Native Americans had stories, quote unquote, in which they referred to hairy devils, foul-smelling, man-like beasts, which the Native Americans avoided. They don't say specifically which tribe, and it would have been fairly easy, I think, if you had talked to any of the indigenous peoples at all
Citing a source
to figure out who. Yeah. Anyway, as people moved more into California in the 1800s, more reports of hairy beasts and upright walking apes began to surface, such as a rider on a stagecoach reporting seeing one hiding in some brush on his stagecoach ride. In April of 1876, a prospector named Turner Helm encountered one of the Borrego Sandman near Dead Man's Hole. He tried unsuccessfully to communicate with it in multiple languages, but when it became aggressive, he brandished his rifle and scared it off. More than a decade later, in March 1888, Charles Cox and Edward Dean went searching for the creature, believing it was responsible for some unsolved murders that had recently been occurring, the victims having been torn apart like an animal had killed them. The two gentlemen shot and killed one of the Sandmen, but somehow, despite their claims that they had shipped the body back to San Diego for display, the corpse went missing in transit and was never seen again. Murders were attributed to the creature in the 1870s as well. Moving forward to 1939, an anonymous store owner and prospector was attacked by a group of upright walking apes when he camped near Borrego Sink. They apparently surrounded his campsite but refused to come closer due to the fire. He described them as covered in white fur with glowing red eyes. In 1964, Major Viktor Stoyanov ran across tracks in the area some 14 inches in length and 9 inches wide. Supposedly, the Major took plaster casts and photographs, although none of these can be seen today. Also in 1964, a father and son reported running across one of the creatures and having it heave rocks at them. The two described it as a shabby, ape-like beast. A few years later, Harold Lancaster in July 1968 was prospecting east of Borrego Springs when he ran across one. He fired his .22 caliber pistol into the air, scaring the Borrego Sandman off. Also in the 60s, a man named Frank Cox supposedly shot a beast that was a cross between a man and a bear near Warner, California at Dead Man's Hole. The creature reportedly had feet that were 24 inches in length. So these are a large collection of stories that span back more than 100 years, and I think that that's pretty compelling. And we're talking about the old days of the Wild West, and sure, people, could let their imaginations get away from them, but these were people who were in the wild a lot and knew the difference between a bear and something that's not a bear. I think that these are pretty interesting stories. So that's the Borrego Sandman.
Where does the Borrego come from? That it's the location?
Mm-hmm. It's the location. Okay. It's at the Borrego Badlands and the Borrego Sink.
Okay.
Which is now mostly state park.
More Southern California?
Southern California near San Diego.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so Sasquatch is the name referred to in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And Northern California is apparently just a hotbed of Sasquatch sightings. Washington State has the highest incidence of Sasquatch or Bigfoot sightings in the country, according to the Bigfoot Field Research Organization.
Before we get too far away, I want to point out there are at least 2 instances where evidence of these creatures, the Sandman, was found and collected and then disappeared. One, a whole ass body disappeared. If you remember, he shot one. And the footprints and evidence that the Major collected disappeared.
So the body disappeared, huh? So they collected the body?
They shot it and sent it on a train so that it could be studied, and it disappeared on the train.
Wow.
So there's going to be, I think, in the midst of your guys' stories, you're probably going to have more instances of evidence disappearing. There is a theory that explains that. And I just wanted to point that out so we could tie it all back together at the end.
That people are making it up and conveniently it's going missing? Because that's what I think.
Okay. Duh. Obviously, that's a possibility. I'm talking about a different theory.
Okay. All right. And you want to reveal that later is what you're saying?
Later.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, continue. Who else has a story? Entertain me.
What I found in all of my research was that the biggest problem with the scientific community wanting to declare Bigfoot a known species or recognize Bigfoot as a species that exists is that there's never any sort of body evidence, that it just doesn't exist, that it keeps not coming through. Now, I didn't actually find any stories where people find that evidence allegedly and then it disappears. So I think that's really interesting.
I've heard of hair samples being taken. I have heard of I have heard that there have been DNA studies done which
Lots of
couldn't
hair
identify the
samples.
animal. Yeah. And but
A
then there's
lot of them are identifiable, and some of them are unknown.
unknown.
And those are the ones that go missing.
That's
Yeah.
pretty well. See, no, I've seen stories where they do actually get analyzed in the lab, and they are identified as unknown animal origin.
One of the questions becomes among the science, where are the bodies? If there's large populations of giant apes living in the woods somewhere,
Right.
would we not find deceased
In-
specimens, ones
In
that died
science
naturally?
speak, they need to have a breeding population.
Yeah.
To that, I say there are people we know are in the forest and we can't find them.
Right. What do our hunters
We
do?
lose people there all the time.
Wait, what?
We lose people in the woods all the
Yeah.
time.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm willing to believe that Bigfoot is real.
Well,
I have a story, but it's not towards any evidence or meant to convince you one way or the other. I thought it was just going to be a good story. So it's called Real Skunk Ape Encounter by Impossible Egg. So it was a humid evening in South Florida, where I grew up. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the dense palmetto trees. I had with me Bella, my dog, taking her along for my wooded journey, along a trail I would frequent. The air was thick with the scent of pine and a distant chirping of crickets. As I ventured deeper into the woods, a strange foul odor began to permeate the air. It was unlike anything I had ever smelled before. And remember, he goes down this often. This is a trail he frequents. It was pungent and almost unbearable. Bella, usually so energetic, started to whimper and act strange, clearly distressed. Suddenly, the underbrush rustled, and I caught a glimpse of something large and hairy moving swiftly between the trees. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what I had seen. Before I could react, Bella darted into the woods and barked furiously. I called out for her, but the only response was the eerie silence of the forest. Panic set in as I ran after her, and the foul odor grew stronger with each step. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon a small clearing. There, standing in dim light, was a creature unlike any I'd ever seen. It was tall, covered in matted fur, and its eyes glowed with the unsettling intelligence. The skunk ape. There was no other explanation for it. This creature let out a low growl, and I froze in place, too terrified to move. Bella was nowhere to be seen. The skunk ape turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the clearing. I spent the next few days searching the woods, calling out for Bella, but she never returned. All I found was her light blue collar I had purchased for her as a Christmas present a few months back. It was a heartbreaking reminder of my beloved pet. Haunted by the encounter, I decided not to report it to the authorities, fearing that it would only make things worse and just remind me. Instead, I shared the story to a few trusted friends and cryptid enthusiasts like you guys, hoping to find some solace and understanding. I've since moved away from the area and never did see Bella or the creature that took her again. I can remember a unique smell like it was yesterday. It leaves with me a goosebumps and chills that I think about to this day.
Yeah,
And
the
that's the end.
uniformity in the account of the smell being one of your first warnings. Which is
with skunk ape, that's the first thing that you notice is usually it's everything around you goes quiet. It's like an eerie, all of the wildlife just sort of knows something's wrong. And then you usually smell that rotting cabbage smell after. And that's usually when they say get up somewhere high.
cabbage, huh? Wow.
Well, I've heard rotting cabbage, or it smells like dead things, or just smells like skunks.
I had heard that the skunk ape in particular, because of where it lives in the swamp smell gets into their fur, and they end up just carrying that smell with them, that kind of rotting, decaying plant life. And so that's why they smell that way. That's like one of the theories about why they smell that way. That's so sad about the dog.
I don't think it's so to be fair, I don't think this is a real story.
Oh,
It's not a throwaway account, but the way it's written, I'm not even truly convinced that this person wrote it themselves. I just thought it was a cool story.
interesting.
So if they wrote it, they're awful. But I don't think they wrote it.
Yeah, the whole "I chose not to report it to authorities" thing. For the reasons that they gave are stupid. Those are weird reasons not to
So
report.
I don't think this is a real one. It just sort of falls in line with what you typically hear of a sloth story. I couldn't find a long form story. Usually, if they're more believable, they're actually shorter. This one, they went and tried to do like full writer mode, and I don't buy it.
Yeah,
But
I hear that.
it's a good story
Some people try to do that though, and try to amp
to
up
get
the
Reddit
storytelling
points.
when they, I try to do that. When I'm recounting, I try to turn on my storytelling, but the vast majority of the time, I think I just am ruining it and making it more boring.
Well, I'd like to, since we're talking about smelly, skunky,
Mm.
and gross things, let's talk about boogers.
Tell us about the wood booger.
So the term wood booger is a colloquial. Can I say that freaking word right? Colloquial name used in southwestern Virginia to describe a large, hairy, bipedal creature akin to Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Okay. So there is some Native American roots to the wood booger, particularly Cherokee legends of hairy giants, or there's an actual name for another one called the Tsul Kalu, which is like a slant-eyed version of Bigfoot that comes from Cherokee legends or other forest spirits. There's a lot of cultural significance, recent cultural significance to the wood booger, because there is the Wood Booger Festival in the area. Somebody, and I couldn't find out who, put up a statue of the wood booger, which very much resembles, if you look it up, you can research it. It's very much like a Sasquatch. The vocalizations of wood boogers, when they do the vocalizations, very much similar to a Sasquatch recording. But there's the Wood Booger Festival in Norton, Virginia, that they have every year that celebrates this Bigfoot. And that's been going on since 2015. Generally, the wood booger is associated with the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is part of the Appalachian Mountains. It's really kind of, most of it is just oral traditions passed down through time. But most of the stories that I found are really from 1970 to present. So back in the 1970s, there was hunters in the High Knob area that reported seeing a 7 to 8 foot tall, hairy creature crossing a trail at dusk. One account describes it pausing to stare at the witnesses before vanishing into the forest. Tracks found nearby were large and human-like, but lacked clear detail due to rocky terrain. There's been encounters from the 80s. A group of teenagers camping near Satsville claimed to have seen a tall, dark figure with glowing yellow eyes watching them from the tree line. The creature allegedly threw a large branch towards their campfire before retreating, leaving behind a musky odor and large footprints. In the 2000s, a fisherman along the Clinch River reported seeing a 9-foot creature wading through shallow water at night. The creature was described as having grayish fur and moving with a hunched gait. It emitted a low growl before disappearing into the woods. And that's basically most of, the sightings are similar, and it has similar coloring, very hairy, dark brown to black. So it's very similar to Sasquatch. So there's a skeptical perspective to this too, because there are skeptics, and a lot of people just claim that these sightings all across the United States are just a misidentification of black bears. Black bears can stand on their hind legs, and they are all those same colors of fur that people say Bigfoots are. They can be brown, they can be black, they can be like a cinnamon color fur.
There aren't any white bears in California though. Like if we're talking about the Borrego Sandman, that one's white.
True.
I
That's a little
think that
different.
we'd be remiss to say that probably a lot of these encounters aren't bears. Some of them probably are, right?
That's fair.
Some of the fur and samples that are being taken to labs end up being known, well-studied animals and get dismissed as nothing. Like it does turn out that what
It's
people
probably
think
like
they
UFO
saw.
sightings where they say 90% is explainable, and then it's just that small fraction that they say is unexplainable.
Right.
That's what you got to pay attention
Yeah.
to. So this is probably something like that.
Yeah.
But, in 2014, Oxford University studied the alleged Bigfoot hairs, not specific to the wood booger, but Bigfoot hairs, and found that most samples belonged to known animals like bears or deer. But that was 2014. There's a lot more evidence that's been collected more recently. There is a 1958 story of Bluff Creek Bigfoot tracks that was later to be revealed as a hoax by Ray Wallace. So this casts doubt on similar claims because you have this 1,000-pound creature trudging through the forest. You would think it would leave a pretty identifiable track, unless they've learned how to traverse the wilderness so well they don't leave tracks.
I mean, there's a lot of leaf litter, especially like if I think about the forest in Flagstaff. There's leaf litter, there's pine needles, there's all kinds of little shrubby moss and rocks. It's really rocky up there. I think that it's harder for me to find tracks than not find tracks. I find poop all the time, but not necessarily tracks because of because it's not that wet and there's a ton of leaf litter to obscure. I mean, it is a big creature, but I still can't.
Well, that's more towards the point. Like, you go out into the woods and you try to look for tracks. It's really hard to find even deer tracks, bear tracks, unless you find some really squishy, fresh mud.
Yeah.
It's hard to find tracks. It's possible, but it's just difficult for the average person unless you're a well-known hunter and you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, you would have to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things in my homework that I was finding, specifically in Arizona and New Mexico, Utah does have Bigfoot. Colorado has Bigfoot. California has not just the Sandman, but also the Yucca Man. And I'll tell about the Yucca Man in a little bit. But something I just kind of wanted to bring up, which I thought was interesting, was I really did a lot of research looking into the Tohono O'odham, the Acoma O'odham, the Papash, like the indigenous peoples of like Gila River, the low desert of Arizona. And they do not have such stories. There are no indigenous oral tellings of giant hairy creatures in the low desert of Arizona. And similarly in New Mexico, there are also not these kinds of stories. So I was actually really struggling at first until I started looking around at the other states. But Arizona and New Mexico, they're just not there. So it is interesting that we have people who have lived in this place for thousands of years who don't have such, like the Hopi don't have such stories, and they've been in for even longer. There are no such stories. But then somehow suddenly, when I looked at the BRFO, is that right? BFRO website to see like where there are sightings. There are sightings even as recently as last year in the Phoenix area, a couple of them, which is really surprising, and it makes me wonder like what are people seeing?
Guy.
Yeah, like a really hairy dude, or are people just really that unfamiliar with what wild animals look like, or not expecting to see like wild horses? Like, I don't know. It's just really interesting. So I did want to point that out, at least in my area. I looked and there really are not. They have other stories of little people. They have other stories of spirit guardians who come and go, but are non-physical for the most part, but not this physical Bigfoot, hairy, wild man creature. There are no such stories. But moving on from that, I did want to tell a little bit about the Yucca Man, because the Yucca Man had multiple interactions with a military base. And I thought that was extremely interesting because military members maybe are not, in my opinion, more trustworthy, but they have a hell of a lot more to lose by coming forward. So I do find these to be very fascinating stories and perhaps a little bit more credible than I might otherwise find them. So the Yucca Man is said to be a desert-adapted Sasquatch that lives throughout Southern California, Nevada, and supposedly Arizona in the Yucca forests. He is said to have been spotted in the Antelope Valley area multiple times from the 1970s and onward. Now, the very first encounter is in 1971, which again is very interesting because this is when we're at the height of like Bigfoot sightings and people are talking about things. So the Yucca Man was first spotted on 29 Palms Marine Base. The story changes slightly depending on the source, but it's said that a Marine guard on duty was found the morning after his shift unconscious with his rifle bent in half. When asked what happened to him, the Marine stated that a huge hairy man had appeared out of the dark and came toward him. The Marine lifted his rifle and ordered the figure to stop, but it took the rifle from him and bent the weapon in half with its hands. The Marine was then knocked unconscious. The creature was stated to have glowing red eyes and smelled horrid. This is another very smelly creature. According to the Occult Museum, this is one of the sources, both the FBI and the CIA were brought in on the investigation of the incident, and it is not clear what they found out. Apparently, there were at least 2 other sightings of similar figures that night. One sighting described that there was a 12-foot tall figure with a smaller figure beside it. Other reports called in that their dogs kept barking at something in the neighborhood. In Fontana, there was a racetrack north of Foothill Boulevard called Mickey Thompson's Fontana Dragway. The racetrack ran from 1955 to 72, and it closed after a series of deaths. Spectators of the crashes said they saw someone they called the Speedway Monster, which was assumed to be a wild man resident of the nearby San Gabriel Mountains who frequently crossed the land at the edge of the dragway. Later reports of the Yucca Man came in 79 when a couple from Desert Hot Springs reported that their car was stopped by a large, hairy man who stepped out into the road. They described that it stepped out from behind a yucca bush and that its chest was the size of a refrigerator, with its arms hanging below its knees with long, tan hair. After stopping the car, the figure then left into the desert. During the same year, in Hemet, 17 possible Yucca Man footprints were found, each about 1.5 feet long and 6 feet apart. What happened to these footprints is unclear. One of the famous photos taken of the Yucca Man was snapped at the Hidden Valley campground, showing a large hairy figure in the middle of a dirt road. And I wonder if I can share this picture. It's a terrible picture. Like, honestly, it's shit. Let me see if I can blow this up. It could be literally anything. I will say, so this particular picture almost looks non-physical. Like, there is something about, like, if we take it as potentially a true picture, the blurriness of it, that it just doesn't seem well defined.
It's got like any ghost picture vibes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my initial. Like, that's an apparition, not a real thing.
So I would leave off with one thing. Old origin Native Americans who have inhabited the Antelope Valley area and greater Mojave Desert of South California for thousands of years have a number of tales regarding hairy devils. According to Ken Lane from Desert Oracle, the Tongva people living around the Santa Ana River called the Devil's hideout east of the river's source in the San Bernardino Mountains the Camp of the Taquis, pronounced the same as the Taquits known to the Coahuila of Agua Caliente. According to John Reed Swanton's The Indian Tribes of North America, Taquis also survives as a site name at the head of the Santa Margarita River at Temecula Creek. Throughout Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley, you'll see it spelled Taquits or Taquits, Tahquitz. The angry specter's unhappy home in the region is the cursed Taquits Canyon. To some, the Taquits are thought to be things that should be avoided in the darker parts of the desert. According to Lane, to the Cahuilla, The Tuckwits could be the original shaman and a murderous monstrosity that collected victims from Tuckwits Rock. It is possible that these encounters could be related to what we know as the Yucca Man. So it ties into the Yucca Man stories from earlier.
Here's what I want to know. Did you find in your stories accounts of people who found them non-threatening and feel protective of them versus accounts of people who found them who thought they were dangerous, whether because of their encounters seemed violent and they felt scared for their safety, or in the account of the story where the guy's dog gets taken? Did you guys have that sort of juxtaposition of encounters?
That's an important thing to bring up because it depends on what kind of Bigfoot you're talking about. The skunk ape is violent. The midnight whistler is known as being passive. It can be territorial, but it's known as being pretty docile.
Wow.
There's the Sasquatch, which usually avoids people.
Grassman's the same way. It avoids people. Is omnivore, will eat whatever, but not people. Whereas the Dogman is a kind of a demon beast that could go after you.
I forgot about the Dogman.
I found accounts of Sasquatch as both being murderous and violent versus people who were strong believers and felt protective and knew, I've heard a story of people who said they felt protected by it, and therefore we think they're harmless and helpers, right? I found maybe the 1970s or maybe the 1990s anyway, a newspaper article interviewing a man who'd made it his life hobby basically to try to hunt and track and find and have more sightings of Bigfoot. And he actually at some point led, like as a business, was a guide for expeditions out into these areas in Northern California to help other people have encounters. And he actually stopped that business. He decided to give it up because he was afraid that one of these days they would have an encounter and one of his own patrons would end up shooting and killing one of them.
Oh.
And so he just took it and did it privately. And, his wife was like, I went with him one time and I don't like it because we saw something and it scared the crap out of me, but he's doing what makes him happy. And yeah, he's spending tens of thousands of our own dollars doing this, but, I believe him and he's into it. So whatever. And that was something that was interesting and compelling to me, is that a lot of these people who are really, really strong believers and enthusiasts and who go out there, who spend money on this equipment to track them and make it their life mission and goal to get out there in the wilderness as much as possible to try to find these things, they're delving their own money into it. Even people who try to do it a little more professionally will apply for grants and funding to try to officially and formally research and find these things, find the breeding populations, for instance, or try to, find archaeological records of them, and can't get granting or funding to do so. So to find that these people are putting their own money into it is one thing that makes me feel like maybe it really is real. Maybe these people, it seems like people get obsessed. Mm-hmm. People have a sighting or an encounter and then they're like, holy crap. And then they put their whole selves into trying to see it again and find it again. And then they form these communities. I do think there are some people with a business savvy mind who probably, to try to break even in some way, find ways to make money, i.e. these guided expeditions and stuff. But it's my suspicion that some of these people really saw what they saw.
Yeah.
And they just become obsessed and need to see it again and find it again and need to be able to prove that it's real, probably. Oh, and then you get these people who claim that they like rip people apart. Mm-hmm. Or I heard a story, and I don't know if it's true. It was on some show on Peacock, I think, called Close Encounters. This guy who was an ex-Marine and a sheriff in Washington went out into the wilderness hiking alone and saw what he could only assume was a Bigfoot, and it hunted him and stalked him as he ran the miles back to his car.
Oh, I saw that one. That
And
was
he was-
hair raising. That
he
one
was
was crazy.
terrified for his own safety and his life. So, and I was like, I don't know if this is true or made up for this show, but there do seem to be numerous accounts where people feel very unsafe, and other accounts where people are okay.
Was so like, whatever he saw, he believed it. Like, I believe that he believed that he was being chased by a predator for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And like, he genuinely seemed scared for his life. And this was a man who had a lot of experience in the woods, who was, I think, what was he, a Marine or something? He was a veteran.
He was an ex-Marine, and he was becoming he was a deputy, like, for the sheriff, local sheriffs.
Yeah. That was a really good story. I know exactly what you're talking about.
There's another story, a docuseries. I don't remember but I tried to start watching it yesterday. It's a 3-parter, and I fell asleep to it. But essentially, in the early 90s, this guy was like a farmhand on a pot farm in Northern California. And there's a lot of these, right? In order to get away with that, you had to be really, really, really remotely located. And there was a buzz going around the farm, that you needed to watch out and be careful because there's something out here. And the idea was that it was Bigfoot. And one of his first nights there, as a, on this job, some guy comes back after going to do like a deal or a drop or whatever of the product. And he's frantic, and he's talking about how it tore them to pieces. It ripped them apart, that we weren't ripped off. You don't get it. The product is there, but it's been shredded up to bits and pieces, and these dudes are in pieces everywhere. And he's just like freaking out. And so this guy who was the hand, and he's telling the story, he's actually an investigative journalist by career.
Okay.
I don't know how he made that career change, but that is ultimately the path he took. And so now, all these years later, he's on a mission trying to figure out what happened back then, and if he could corroborate any of this story that he remembers being kind of a bystander part of. And I fell asleep, so maybe for the Bigfoot reflection, I will be able to catch up and say how that story ends. But it's another piece of that puzzle of people who claim that these are very dangerous beings that are capable of ripping people to pieces, or that will hunt and stalk you and chase you out of the forest, versus these people who feel more protective and like they're docile and friendly. It's really hard to kind of catch what is the demeanor of these things based on encounters.
If we believe that people are really encountering them, is it so hard to believe that there are subsets and subspecies? I mean, and that maybe different types of Bigfoot behave different ways. And JT, I had actually forgotten about the Dogman stuff.
Okay, so Bigfoot type. Okay, so I found that there's 3 different Bigfoot types. So Bigfoot type 1 would be Sasquatch.
Okay.
Bigfoot type 2 would be more like the wood booger, which is similar to the Sasquatch, but just not in that region, just across the rest of the United States. When you see a story of a Bigfoot type, is a Bigfoot type 2. And then type 3 is basically the Dogman. So what I really am interested in is just kind of describing what the Dogman looks like. So the Dogman is kind of the northeast most famous version of Bigfoot. And that is the most widespread name. There is the Beast of Bray Road, which has been determined to be Dogman, Man-Wolf, upright canid, and canid is the cryptozoological name or term used by researchers to describe the Dogman. There are people that believe it's a skinwalker, which we can that's like a whole nother discussion.
Disagree. I already disagree, but continue.
I knew you would. So this also has crossover into the Wendigo. Did I say that right?
Wendigo.
Into
Or
that
Wendigo. I think I've heard it said both
Wendigo.
ways.
That's yeah. He has crossover into the Wendigo as well. So he is described as sometimes anywhere from 7 to 15 feet tall, but he has a definite canine wolf face. The sounds of Dogman are very much wolf sounding or howling. And the stories of the Dogman go all the way back to 1887, where in Wexford County, the lumberjacks there reported a creature with a human body and a dog's head. And these sightings continued throughout the 20th century with a surge in the 80s after a radio DJ, Steve Cook, released a song called The Legend. And that was in 1987, based on the local stories, where a witness described a 7 to 10 foot creature with glowing red eyes and a wolf like
We've
snout.
got to cross-reference, but is that how the comic guy Dave Pilkey came up with Dogman, that like children's book graphic novel? There's a children's graphic novel called Dogman, and it's the story of like a police dog and a police officer both get like seriously injured on the job, and so to solve the problem they sew the dog's head onto the cop's body and thus becomes Dogman.
That
And it's
sounds
this like
terrible.
super
I don't think
gross.
they're related.
It's so gross. And it's like all my 5-year-olds were obsessed with it. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But so that's what Dogman is. It's people describe it as being the body of a man and the head of a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck? Okay. Sorry. I just had to
Usually
stop you.
in the descriptions I've heard, it's furred all over. Like it is like black fur all over its
Okay.
whole
So
body.
humanoid.
With like canine legs, but yeah, humanoid. Like it's not just a man with a dog head. Like it's
So canine legs, but it's bipedal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't
It's
compute.
bipedal.
well, it's like any of
But
freaking Underworld, that movie series with the werewolves that are bipedal, kind of.
Mhm.
Except they
Right.
have dogmen have fur.
But it,
So
like
when you-
in a movie that can happen, but in reality, like the muscuskeletal, like
So the
dog legs can't walk bipedally.
The part where we lose you about Dogman is the fact that he has dog legs that are bipedal and not the dog head.
Well, I
on a
mean, obviously the
human-ish
whole
body.
thing, but it's just like that's where we could start there. Where do you want to start?
So you imagine imagine this. Imagine a Sasquatch with a wolf head. That's basically what they describe it as. Is
Okay.
it's hairy
But
all
also
over.
it has,
And it has a wolf snout. It sounds like a wolf. It's got the red eyes. Whereas like a werewolf or a wolf man or even a skinwalker has more of the wolf's body, but is able to stand on the hind legs. Which,
Interesting.
if you know, if you do research on dire wolves, when they existed, they could stand on their hind legs for a time, like bears can stand on their hind legs for a little while. They can't. I don't know if they can necessarily walk on them, but they can definitely stand on them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you think, with kind of these descriptions, is Dogman really a Bigfoot, or is it its own thing?
I'm a little
I don't
bit.
know. What do those sounds sound like? Because there's this guy, Eric Beckjord. He was one of the prominent Bigfoot, interests. And he spent a lot of time out trying to find evidence. He's got lots of tracks, and he would go out and get recordings of Bigfoot and submit them to this particular place at a university to have them analyzed. And, in one of the articles I read, this person at the university was like, this sounds remarkably like coyotes. If I didn't know any better, I would say this is just coyotes.
Can you hear this? Here we go.
That sounds like
Yeah.
a dog.
Sorry.
Sounds like a dog or... I've heard...
You know what that reminds me of?
a
Remember
really pissed off dog.
remember when we would spend our summers in Tennessee and our grandfather told us that there were a bunch of wild dogs, like they were domesticated dogs that like got released out into the woods many generations ago, and they were just wild dogs now, and they would just cry out at night. They sounded like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like anything supernatural or
No, and
just
honestly, it
sounds
doesn't
like-
even really sound like a wolf.
no. It sounds like a
It sounds
dog.
more dog-like
Yeah, dog.
than a wolf or a coyote.
And I think that's their point. Like it sounds like a very large dog.
Maybe to play devil's advocate here, remember in our original ape-like cryptid episode, we talked about the devil monkeys of Flagstaff,
Uh-huh.
and they were like, people thought that they were dog-like. They had dog-like faces, but they thought maybe that they were like escaped baboons or something. I mean, we do have precedent in the ape family for
Yeah.
these long dog-shaped noses. Like if you see this picture,
I was just going to say, I saw a picture of something that I had only just heard about in doing this research called the hide behinds. Have you guys heard of this? I think it might be specific to Washington or the Pacific Northwest. People call them the hide behinds because that's what they do. And allegedly they're extremely aggressive. And when you look them up and find drawings of them, it reminded me of when we were talking about Bridgewater Triangle, and JT said that there were sightings of like weird, like Bigfoots or pugwagees that sometimes looked cat-like, like cat standing upright. My initial reaction was that it looked partially like an ape, partially like a cat. And this picture that you just pulled up that looks like the devil monkey baboon thing, it could be in that vein too. And so therefore, I guess it wouldn't be that far-fetched, too far of a reach to say dog man too. Do I believe that this is... the way people describe it as it's called the hide behind because it hides behind bushes, and they're known for being really aggressive, and people disappear and stuff and they'll kill you. And I'm just thinking that sounds like wildcats, cougars, cougar behavior.
Yeah, actually you're right about that.
Typical cat behavior.
Oh, cats.
Right, big cat assholes.
Well, domestic cats do it too.
Well, we
They
love
just
our
hide back
cats,
there and wait for you to pass.
but even
them.
domestic
Well, yeah.
cats are assholes.
No, I mean, everybody has that, like, we've all seen that cats are assholes, like, reel of all the footage of cats, like, knocking stuff over for no reason, or,
Except for Amanda's
my cat's
cat.
not an asshole. She's pretty cool.
Amanda's cat is a
cat's pretty
scaredy
legit.
cat.
Yeah, she is a little bit of a chicken.
Anyway,
Loki
I mean,
would cause
I don't
some
know if
havoc.
dog man is related. I think the devil monkey thing is maybe a little closer. If we learned anything from, oh man, what was that tiger guy show?
Oh,
The Tiger
King?
King?
Tiger King.
Tiger King. If we learned anything from that, it's that people are smuggling in exotic animals and trying to keep them as pets all the time, and then like just sometimes those bastards get loose and
Yeah.
stuff happens, and we end up with these like super foreign, exotic, wild animals in our own forests. I mean, I
think
don't
we
know.
said that in the last episode, but I guess the point of me bringing that picture up is, I
Bridgewater,
guess,
yeah.
Dogman is not really that far-fetched if you think about it in context of the shape face of a baboon. Like maybe
right.
it could
And
be
an
a type
ape,
of
like the relation to Bigfoot.
yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
and
like
that-
to get back to the original question.
Yeah.
That is somebody had described the dogman as having more of a bamboo style face, which is
Bamboo.
similar
Baboon, yeah.
to a dog type face. But again, there's not any concrete evidence, just
Sweet.
stories.
Thank you for
When
wrapping it
people
back around for me.
Yeah, when people start
The
talking about
theory.
dogmen, I mean that's when I get like, you're just weird.
I start to lose my belief a little bit when we start talking about Dogman. But then I'm like,
A
to
bit.
myself, I'm like, where do I really draw the line here, though? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I believe that Sasquatch, Bigfoot, out in these super remote places where there's just these vast expanses of thick canopied forests that nobody can really reasonably explore, it's not that intangible, unrealistic to think that there could be species like a super private, smart species of something
Maybe buries its dead.
that, right, like maybe they have some settlements or encampments. And yes, I mean, human beings, that's what set us apart, was our sense of compassion, and that we started caring for our sick and burying them. And that was one of the keys to the separation from hominids and other mammals, was the way that we cared for our sick. And so maybe Bigfoot could be some sort of ape species. I mean, elephants and other animals do it too, where they grieve the dead, and of course those animals can't reasonably bury them. If we have an animal that's humanoid, bipedal, has use of maybe four, oppositional thumbs, and a sense of intelligence and aversion from the human species. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's just some weird, there's like the ones that get cited are outlanders that are like just travel too far for some reason by accident.
Exiled from their communities for some reason. That
Mm.
happens even among ape tribes. So I will, to your point, I feel like I've seen documentaries about humans 400,000 years in the past. And when I say humans, I mean human ancestors, Australopithecus, like these older humans who would have had other branching descendants, not just humans, but other human type creatures who buried their dead by, and I say that in quotes, buried their dead by taking them into caves. And there were specific special caves where they would place their dead bodies. My point was that they wouldn't even necessarily have to have tools to dig. If they had access to a cave, and they, it would be enough. Like they could be taking care of their dead in that kind of way, like hiding the body, but putting the body someplace, something like that.
Right.
So
Okay.
I wanted to come back to another theory. It's come up before, and I don't have any specific stories. I'm very annoyed because they seem to be behind a paywall. Like there are movies and books and shows that you can pay for to watch on Apple TV, Prime, Amazon Prime TV. There's different things that you can pay for. There's IMDb has a movie about it. Somebody out there came up with this theory that Bigfoot has some connection to UFOs and or might be an interdimensional being.
Yes.
So paranormal investigators and Bigfoot investigators and UFO investigators all used to keep themselves pretty separate from each other because each thought the other was just sort of nuts. And they all just really thought, like, Bigfoot people thought that the UFO people were insane, and ghost people thought the Bigfoot people had a screw loose, and everybody just thought everybody else was crazy. But with the advent of technology, they're talking to each other more now, and they've been able to share ideas. And one of the things, apparently, that is very common with Bigfoot sightings is there's usually a bright orange orb. There's usually some kind of paranormal orb type thing that is associated or happens either right before or right after a Bigfoot sighting or in the area of a Bigfoot encounter. And then
it reminds me of Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes, exactly. And additionally, there have been, when they're looking at the data between where Bigfoot are found and where UFO sightings have occurred, they're usually overlapping. Like there's usually a lot of overlap between the two. So there's this idea out there that potentially the reason why we can't find bodies, the reason why Bigfoot is so elusive and seems to come and go, just magically be on a site and then not be on a site, the reason why there's usually orbs, the reason why these happen in areas where there's UFO activity is because Bigfoot themselves are either an alien who is like investigating the earth or has some way of traveling through the portals that maybe the UFOs are also traveling through. Maybe UFOs are also interdimensional, and that these are creatures that come and go into and out of our reality. It's a very interesting theory to think about. It's pretty out there, but I mean, if we're willing to suspend belief and talk about fae and jinn and aliens as being interdimensional, then, why not UFOs?
The other correlation too would be missing 411s. Oh, I was talking about missing 411, like correlations of where the missing 411 are versus Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings and things like that.
I think that the idea that Bigfoot is oftentimes seen with an orb, which I haven't heard before, it ties in with JT's Pugwudgie being Bigfoot babies, because weren't the Pugwudgie known for kind of turning into balls of light and disappearing?
Yep.
Maybe that's the Bigfoot having their Pugwudgie baby with them.
Maybe.
Bigfoot's on foot because they're able to defend themselves, and Pugwudgie is in orb form. That's to me as viable as the portal thing.
That's a wandering crow.
Oh, cray.
I love it when we come up with our own ideas about things.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. I was starting to get starting to feel a little convinced that it's possible. The interdimensionality, I don't know. I think maybe they're just super like defensively good at hiding. Until they're not. And according to all the sightings of them, in 3 steps, they can be like yards. They can move yards really quickly because of how
span is
long their stride is. It doesn't take much effort at all for them to be able to clear large distances effortlessly. And so maybe that's another thing, is that they can move very quickly, and that's another reason why they can be here one moment and gone the next. The wood knocking, people reporting like just hearing this wood knocking sound and the smell. There were there were congruencies in the stories that made me think it's fun that there are these little details here and there that match up between the stories that make it a little more believable.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back to the story that I told, where the dudes actually killed one of the Sandman, the Borrego Sandman, and shipped it on a train to San Diego, and the body just disappeared.
And what year was that?
That was 1890s.
Okay.
Like, if you look back at the stories of people who swear up and down that they've captured footage, or they've caught hair, or they... Like, I don't think that this is the only time that people have said that they actually killed one and had a body. I know that there have been other stories, and that the body just disappears. So then the question becomes, did the body disappear because somebody wanted it for some other purpose, or because they wanted to suppress evidence, or did the body disappear because it is an interdimensional being and only has a limited time frame that it can actually exist in this reality?
That's
so
weird.
That was my point.
What is the physics of that? I don't understand. You're talking about these guys who killed the thing, and why doesn't a body ever turn up? And here we are again in the mid 1900s, and these guys have video camera evidence of seeing this thing and allegedly kill more than one of them, and the evidence doesn't turn up. And to me, that just screams that it's all made up and people trying to get attention for some reason about it.
I have heard this idea floated, and I think I heard it on another podcast. It might have been Belief Hole, where if Bigfoot was proved to be real, it would call into question and would disrupt the current paradigm of human evolution and what could be true and what could not be true about what actually exists in the world today. Because right now, the current paradigm is, humans evolved, there were Neanderthals, interbreeding, blah, all other humanoid species were outcompeted.
The Smithsonian
They don't
has
exist.
multiple stories about them covering stuff up.
Yeah, so Smithsonian is like infamous, supposedly. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about the Smithsonian covering things up.
Okay.
And then
so the Smithsonian covering things up.
Even something just as simple as like the Graham Bell or Bell Graham, like the what is it? The Apocalypse on Netflix. You know what I'm talking about, JT. Cameron, where he's trying to set back human evolution. Like we have evidence
currents
that
where we actually all died down. That's why our
something
culture
apocalypse. We're
Ancient-
a people
ancient
with amnesia.
apocalypse.
Ancient apocalypse.
Yeah.
Where like the idea is that we were capable of modern structures, complicated structures, 10,000 years before what modern anthropologists are saying is even possible. And so even that gets a ton of pushback, because to push that back would call into question everything else we know about human evolution. And there's a lot of people whose careers are on the lines, and it would be a huge mind-blowing event for these people who've built their entire careers off of this knowing that humanity didn't actually start making these monolithic structures until like 3000 2000 BC. But really the evidence shows it was closer to 8 or 10,000 BC if you are willing to be open to it.
To circle back, so they're well known because there are multiple theories out there floating around, not well known, that the Smithsonian, for example, does that exact thing where they will cover something up if it doesn't match the
current timeline
or
the accepted
what is that called, where you have like narrative, the current narrative,
paradigm narrative. So if we can't even accept like Göbekli Tepe, which has been carbon dated to 12,000 BC or whatever the heck it's been carbon, it's 12,000 years old, we know, and it pushes back human history thousands and thousands of years more than we ever thought possible, and we still are struggling to come to terms with that. What would the reality of a modern alternate human species do? Like, what would that change, and who would that threaten, and why?
a living missing
so
link.
Maybe there is a reason why. Yeah. So that's one of the ideas that's out there. Like, maybe there's a reason why we never find these bodies. Maybe because bodies have been found and they've been hidden away.
Well, I think that maybe we need to go do our own study of these and try to find a Bigfoot body. There is an event
Go squashing
here in Arizona in September
Oh.
24th to the 28th, Wednesday through Sunday. I don't know where exactly, but in the, where is he saying? In the Fort Apache Indian Reservation area. So
Where's that?
there is an event put on by the BFRO. So if you go to bfro.net and look up Arizona, you can register to go to this event and look for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Down.
But they also say to bring your own thermal camera.
Hey, those are cheap
Well,
these
you
days.
can
Very
buy one
important.
from them at a very affordable price.
You can get an attachment that has the FLIR for your phone for like $100.
Yep.
the FLIR.
Forward-looking infrared.
FLIR de bear. The burp
Well,
FLIR de bear.
High-res thermal cameras are less than $1,000 now
Well, for $150, you get the attachment for your phone. And
because
it works just as
the
well.
BFRO sells them for close to wholesale price.
Those bastards.
So
They said that
affordable.
they were very affordable because they want everybody to be able to have one.
Yes.
I kind of feel like we didn't go over the categories and like the specific descriptions of each of them very well. We just sort of
Oh,
jumped into
There's
the
a lot.
stories of and
well, that's
I kind of did.
Part
I
of the
got the
problem.
three main, but there's a lot.
I think JT, you did.
We ended up
You and
finding-
Mandy did the most of like the exposition of your chosen species of Bigfoot.
I just assume that they're all exactly the same, or like that they're really the same, and that the differences in descriptions are just based on people and what they are or are not
Well,
seeing.
here's a big one. Skunk ape is known to have 4 toes. That's pretty big because they're called Bigfoot. This one is the only one to have less appendages. And so that's a
well, and the
big
dogman
distinction.
footprint is like a dog foot.
There we go.
Yeah, I didn't bother to look into the descriptive
We kind of glossed
because
over
it
that
was.
whole section.
It's my assumption.
We kind of glossed over that whole section of.
Yeah.
I think it's a good point that there are differences.
There are.
So I'm glad you brought it up and that we didn't close out this episode without mentioning that. But I will say I didn't bother to look it up because it was my assumption that all Bigfoot sightings are literally like the same creature that have just been given different regional titles, and so turns out we're saying not so much.
Nope, I totally disagree with that because they have different
Not so
colors
much.
and they have different sizes, and I
they're
think
all
it depends on,
offspring
have
of,
different hair colors and stuff.
they're
I
all-
think it depends on the
Regional
environment. Yeah, exactly. Thank you,
Yes.
Karen.
Regional
Regional
adaptation.
adaptation.
They're all offspring of Cain and Lilith.
Mm.
You know, after Lilith was discarded by Adam, she
Do
got
you
with Cain.
believe that theory?
If they're
JT?
offspring of Lilith, that means that they're jinn.
Uh-huh.
Oh, so they are interdimensional.
Mm.
Whoa, we solved it.
Paguagini.
Got it.
There we go. Another Wandering Crow
Paguagini.
exclusive.
You
We
know,
did it.
honestly, that fine.
You see why I brought that up?
Fine.
Nice.
No, Cameron mentioned Jin earlier, and that's what
like
made
it.
me think about it.
That's actually a really cool tie-in. All right, let's close it out.
Yeah, let's close it out.
This has been another episode of
The Wandering
Wandering
Crow.
Crow.
Hey, that was close.
What? We got it close that time.
Okay, we'll get it.
I go back.